This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. In this episode, I have a lot of fun talking with Cory Gregory and John Fosco. They are the hosts of the Business and Biceps podcast, and we cover a lot of areas, including talking about Cory's time learning and working with Arnold Schwarzenegger, the importance of confidence as an entrepreneur, and how to build 700,000 Twitter followers. Enjoy the episode. Hey, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted today to have Cory Gregory and John Fosco. Cory and John are the hosts of the Business and Biceps podcast, which helps people get stronger in business, fitness, and motivation. Cory is the co-founder of sports nutrition powerhouse MusclePharma and is a top trainer and leader on diet and nutrition. As a way to save for college, Cory worked as an underground coal miner until he opened a gym at the age of 20. Since then, he has gone to compete in some of the world's biggest powerlifting competitions, has been featured on a cover of 11 fitness magazines, and was recently added to Arnold Schwarzenegger's fitness advisory board. Meanwhile, John Fosco is a serial entrepreneur, and his latest business, Activate Media, is already becoming an industry-leading marketing agency for athletes and entertainers. A veteran in sports marketing, John represents a number of popular UFC and MMA fighters. Together, these guys are doing some really creative and cool things. It's my pleasure to have them both on the show. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, thanks, James.
Thank you, James.
So share with our listeners, what's going on in both of your worlds just now?
Well, I'll tell you what, Business and Biceps is killing it. John and I started a podcast. We're on about our first episode, and it's really catching some fire. And we've just been having a blast helping develop young people and really people of all ages. They're getting their dose of business with a nice little healthy dose of fitness on top of it. So it's been a lot of fun. And I worked with John for a long time as we were building MusclePharma. John was the leading marketing agency in the UFC space and had all the major clients from MusclePharma to Sony to Safe Auto, Xbox, everybody, and just crushed it. So we linked up, started doing the podcast after we both had sold our prospective businesses, and we've just got a lot of cool insight for these people. And every week, man, we're having a blast, and it's been good because I've always kind of been in the public eye. And I've known John for a really long time, and it's exciting to get his point of view on everything because this dude adds some crazy value on a regular basis. So it's been a blast to bring him into my world and him bring me into his world, I'd say. So it's been good.
One thing I would add, James, to that, and Cory nailed it, was that, Activate, there's a reason behind the name, and that's because we have this feeling, at least in our society on this side of the pond, I'm not sure if you experience it, that youth especially, and even into the older people, they are not activating their minds, right? They're taking what the news tells them. They're taking what their parents tell them. People aren't asking why. People aren't information seeking, and it's creating this kind of lemming-like culture, and we're here to just challenge conventional thinking, not tell you how to think, but just encourage our youth to really ask why and challenge things for the betterment of their brain.
That's a great point. In fact, funny, if I was talking at an event recently where someone was talking about just exactly what you just spoke about there, John, and he was talking about, he was a scientist, and he was talking about the psychology of it and why, when kids, if you've ever spent any time around, young kids like 3 or 4, and they've got crayons and they're sitting painting and they're like completely immersed in what they're doing. And they go to school and they get made into like more conventional. In fact, you actually even see it in their artwork. It goes from like kind of crazy stuff into very, buildings and conventional stuff. And even the language changes as well. And that's all part of growing up. But it's kind of getting to that point of, when you leave school and you go out into the world, if people are still stuck in that kind of conventional mindset and don't break out into a kind of post-conventional, as you were saying, asking kind of bigger questions and looking for information.
Right. And that's exactly it, because we're just kind of experiencing this what we like to call Me Too syndrome. Me too. Me. Oh, what do you like? Oh, I like the #1 song on the pop chart too. Oh, what TV show? Oh, I like The Walking Dead too. And it's like, what happened to individuality? Because on the topic of business, entrepreneurship, creativity, man, all the most creative people, all the biggest titans of industry, they weren't Me Too thinkers. They were, why the fuck, sorry if I can't swear, can't I do this? Why can't I do that? Well, I'm going to make it happen. They weren't Me Too thinkers. So we really want to get rid of that.
And so when you were doing the podcast, when you were first kind of starting on the podcast, what was you thinking? What was did you have an ideal listener in mind for it? And has the show changed? I mean, you're saying over 60 plus episodes now. Has the show changed in that time?
So I'll start with that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Early on, we really had a few topics that we'd hit. We really thought about doing like a PTI, which is a really kind of popular show on ESPN here in the States. Some quick hitter things, and talked about mostly business and development stuff. Since it's evolved a little bit to where obviously I have a fitness background, and so does John too, to where we have some 2 or 3 really hard hitting business things we believe they can have a lot of takeaways and a lot of value from, and then we hit them with a really good dose of fitness. And it has evolved over 60 episodes. I think we've gotten a lot better. I think we've got a lot better working off of each other, and we both got to get to a groove so comfortable that we also did a 5-hour ebook called Entrepreneur or Wantrepreneur. Really, that's like a brutal essential crash course to see if you really have what the makings of to live the entrepreneurial lifestyle, not just say it because it's cool, but really what it takes to be a true entrepreneur. So it's been a cool evolution, James.
Yeah.
And when you speak to your listeners, do you get a sense? Do they tell you? I mean, are they listening to the show on their way to the gym after to work out, or on the way back, or are they where are they listening to? Are you kind of getting that feedback from people now?
I think we got a lot of people that listen in the gym. I think we got a lot of people that listen at work, and I think we have a decent population. I'm an drug addict, a recovered drug addict, and we make it a point to hit on the tsunami of destruction that prescription painkillers have laid to the United States. And I think we're starting to get some more listeners there. But yeah, the gym, work, and people struggling with addiction, trying to find a better way.
And because we drop it, James, on a Monday too, a lot of the things that I preach and kind of my teachings and have for a long time is, a lot of these guys are getting up early, going to the gym. They're listening to the podcast on the way to the gym, finishing it up during their warm up or partly through the gym. I also have a whole culture of people that do what I call lunge and learn, which is, do walking lunges for 400 meters while they're listening to some positive material. So we get a lot of that too. So it's really a lot of it's fitness oriented. Like John said, we got a whole new demo coming for his specific things that he's been helping people with personally, which has been amazing to watch. And so it's a little all over the board, but I think the demo is starting to open up a little bit more as we just recently started to hit a bigger groove too. It's exciting.
And for both of you, can you remember that time where, in the kind of stuff that you do now, the work you do now, when you kind of hit a bit of a groove on it, and it just started feeling like it was really working, things were powering ahead? Do you both kind of remember that time, or was there a specific moment we said, okay, it's happening now, it's happening?
I could tell you this, James, like Cory and I were in a unique position because we've been grinding on the entrepreneurial tip for 15 plus years, and we've both, I don't want to say hit it, but we've both had some very successful ventures. We've made some good money, and 50% of the reason we started Activate and the Business and Biceps podcast literally was not about hitting the ball out of the park and making money. It's truly about helping people and being the guy that me and Cory didn't have in a lot of respects when we were 17 or 18 or 21, and we could have used some guidance. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like, we
sure.
really want to give back,
And is that why you use the podcast as a format? Because it's such an intimate thing. You've got your earbuds in. It feels like someone's talking to you. It's different from a book or other, even videos, which you've kind of got to be actually sitting down and watching or absorbing in some way. Is that why you went for the podcast format?
I think that I had some background in it. I really wanted to get John. I've heard John say some epic things over the last 7 or 8 years that we worked together previous to being partners when we were working, alongside each other and, as a vendor and a marketing company relationship. And I was like, man, I think more people need to hear this guy. And honestly, we don't live in the same area. That was the easiest way for us to do something positive every week towards as we're building and onboarding clients and building some other businesses. And it just seemed natural, man. And we could call a HD line or do Skype or whatever it is and just riff, and people were digging it. And we always joke that it can't be stopped because, we have the time, we have the chops, we have the background, we like doing it, and we'll just keep rolling this thing. And, it's starting to pop now. So it's, it is, man. And you know how it is, James. People come back to you and go, man, I listened to this episode and it did this for me. And there's no monetary value that can be reached whenever you can touch somebody to that level. It's real powerful, man.
Absolutely. And where do you guys go then? Now you're in this new business that you're working on together, the podcast and the other things that you've kind of got going on. Where do each of you go for inspiration, for the ideas for new services for your clients, for ideas for campaigns, marketing campaigns? Where do you go for that inspiration?
I don't want to sound cocky, but I'm gonna. When me and Cory put our heads together, some epic shit comes out, and right now we're on board. I'm sorry, we're in the process of onboarding, a multi-billion-dollar a company that does multi-billions in revenue, and we're 5 months old. So we read books. Listen, we stay up to date on great thinkers, but we try not to go away from what we know, and we're believers, James, in specific things like we tell people this all the time, man, failure is mandatory. Embrace failure because there is no growth without it. And me and Cory have gotten our ass kicked. We've gotten our heads stepped on. We've gotten brutalized, but you know what? We're still standing, and right now we're standing pretty high. So if I'm going to bet on anyone's brain, it's my guy right here, Cory's. And when we get together, man, some cool shit comes out.
So, Cory, where do you go there? Where do you go for that kind of well of inspiration?
Well, we, like John said, we have such a think tank between the two of us. It's been pretty awesome. I was very fortunate to learn directly from Arnold Schwarzenegger for a few years, and the amount of time, personal time that I had with Arnold to learn about just the way he thinks, his business, and the way he operates, I think is invaluable. I don't know a lot of people who have had that type of opportunity. And so I would say like Arnold was always my idol. And once I actually got to know him as a friend and business partner for, we worked together for about 3 straight years. It was really cool. And it definitely helped me mature, from that standpoint. So I would say, it's probably cliche because I'm a fitness guy, but I would say Arnold is still kind of the guy that was, is a mentor, but also I've looked up to since I was a kid. And, he honestly kind of knocked it out of the park for me when I actually got to be around him. It was cool.
And outside of actually just being in the gym with him and learning from him that way, what were the other things you kind of learned about in terms of mindset and in terms of building businesses? Obviously, he's very successful. I know obviously when he was first starting out, he was plowing everything into property in Santa Monica and things. So what did you learn from him also about mindset and entrepreneurship? Yeah,
so I always tell people that Arnold and I rapped a lot about workouts because that was part of what we were doing, right? And we wrote plans together and did things for a lot of the content. But I actually grabbed more off him outside of the gym than I did inside the gym because I was pretty confident in my ability inside the gym. It was more about like just how big he thinks. And so there's a lot of takeaways from being around a guy that's like, well, I'm going to create the biggest fitness event on the planet and which he did with the Arnold Classic. And then as soon as it reached the pinnacle, he goes, now I'll do it on every continent. And that right there is in a nutshell. And he does. There's one on every continent now. And in a nutshell, that's just how he thinks. And, he told me all the time, sleep faster, which is, he only sleeps about 5 hours a night. He's done that for years. He's just a boss. That's the only way to, and I can't say enough. I mean, I could talk about it forever. And so I'll wrap it up with, he's a boss. He operates like a boss, and his confidence is just doesn't seem like it's ever skewed, man. He just knows who he is, and I think that's why he's been so successful. He's always turned anything positive that somebody would say, like whether it was about his accent when he was an actor or this or that, into a if they said a negative, he would turn it into a positive and just crush it. I mean, he just crushes it, man. So. And
you mentioned you've both had those experiences over the years of having your head stomped on and having times where you've worked on projects, you've given it your heart and your soul, but for whatever reason it hasn't worked out like you'd hoped. Can each of you maybe talk about a specific experience where that happened? You worked on something, it just didn't work out like you'd hoped, but actually more importantly, what were the lessons that you took away from that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can tell you that I started a record label with two of the most popular and influential tech entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley today, and three other partners. Two of the partners created one of the largest hip-hop hits in the last 10 years. So we had money, we had tech, we had grinders, we had everything, right? But when it came to putting the producers in the booth, we learned something that we were not aware of going into the music business. And that is that artists are not businessmen, meaning they do not work, nor do they care about deadlines. They work at 3 a.m. when they wake up from a dream and they feel inspired. Their brains are completely opposite. And there was this constant gridlock between the businessmen, the money guys, the grinders, and the artist. And after about a year, it was like, you know what, guys? We're all successful. Let's go our separate ways. And what we learned is that the creative mind, like the truly creative mind, artistic, music, and the business mind are completely separate. And if you don't know that going in, get ready for some problems.
And what about you, Cory? What's an experience that you've had?
Well, I really think that I've learned a lot off what was, my major venture, which was MusclePharm. I walked away from the company about 9 months ago. We're publicly traded, very Wall Street-ish at this point. Things had just kind of changed. And I think I learned, I know I learned that scalability of a company that's in growth mode like MusclePharm just grew so fast, James. I mean, nothing that we could ever predicted. And to John's point too, like we just crushed it marketing wise. And so we sold crap loads of product. And a lot of it was because of the UFC. A lot of it was because of the content like I created with a guy like Arnold and social media protocols and a lot of things that I know were a big contributor. But I think we were weak in some supply chain areas and some other things. And I think that those weren't necessarily the exact parts I was involved in. My business partner took care of more of that stuff. I was more on the marketing side. But what I learned was, especially when a business is that big, even if it's not your wheelhouse, I should have probably sat in on more of those meetings, even as we got bigger and I got more in my wheelhouse, which I was really good at. I think I learned that. I think I also learned that you should probably take a little bit more time as you get certain pieces of the puzzle. So look, scalability of a business that grows at an astronomical rate is an extremely tricky chess game. So, hindsight 2020, I would have loved to play it maybe a little different. I still think it was a successful, business that grew to well over 100 million in sales and sold about $500 million in the time that I was there. But yeah, I wouldn't say like it was a failure, because it definitely wasn't, but I definitely think that there's a lot of things that could have been done differently. So.
And for both of you, on this kind of journey you've had as entrepreneurs, building these different businesses over the years, and really kind of pushing yourself to what was possible, can you talk about any light bulb moments, any kind of insights, those times in your life when you go, oh, okay, this is the direction I need to be going with the business, or personally, or just kind of insights and a new distinction that you made and said, okay, this is what I need to do now. Can you talk about any of those specific moments?
I could tell you one where. And I think people on the other side of the pond know who Conor McGregor is, and he displays this all the time. I realized very early on, if I wanted to be an entrepreneur and I wanted to essentially, take on a business, create it where there's no handbook, where I am making up the rules as I go, I need to have a borderline insane, demented confidence in myself. That even if I get hit in the face with a 2x4 1,000 times, I don't think I'll ever get hit in the head by the 2x4 again. Like, you need to believe in yourself, so deeply, because the amount of obstacles that come with not only starting, but owning and producing positive revenue, they're insane, man. They never stop. So you literally need to have a belief in yourself that is borderline insane. That's what I figured out.
And John, I noticed that with I think on the website as well, you guys go into schools and you talk to students at universities, and I would imagine when you're kind of going in there, there's a lot of folks in there, guys and girls, who maybe don't have that confidence at this point. They've kind of they've got an idea that they want to be entrepreneurs, they want to maybe build something, but they just don't have that yet. Is there any advice that you give to them on how to develop that?
James, here's our advice, and it's what our book is about, right? It's okay not to be an entrepreneur, because being an entrepreneur, you have to be part Superman, because you have to be able to take an enormous financial loss. You have to get angry at employees. You need to fire people. And then you need to be able to come home to a wife, to a family, and literally act like nothing happened. I mean, the entrepreneurial life is the most stressful life in the world. And if you're not cut from a special cloth, dude, it's okay. Go work a regular job. The fantasy of owning your own business is exactly that, a fantasy. And if it's not, you'll know real quick, because you're one of the few badasses. That's kind of how I look at it.
And Cory, what about yourself? What was that kind of insight, that light bulb moment for you?
So my thing is in 2010, early in 2010, I was at a UFC event, and I met the one of the owners of Tap Out, and he gave me some very interesting advice about how I should, social media wise, kind of embed myself in the brand and create, just a really, really strategic place for myself inside of MusclePharma, which I had already kind of been doing, but not really like in a thought-provoking way on a day-to-day basis. And I went home that night, signed up for Twitter. And to date, Twitter's where I have the most followers, is almost 700,000. And really that started what became really a niche thing for me in social media, in the fitness realm, for programming, for question and answer, for if you tweet me, I tweet you back. And then now it's if you snap me, I snap you back, or Instagram, whatever it may be, to where I could really get my personality out, and I just felt natural. Like literally day one felt natural. I was like, oh, I got this. And it just really filled a void for me, that I had been raising capital and building this business, and I really just didn't have the interaction with the customer to the level that I knew would create loyalty, or really sufficed what my background had been in, which was training and helping people. And so that was a huge moment for me. And honestly, I feel like I've just pretty much crushed it since that point, because it's just really what I do, and it's very natural for me. So I would think the advice that Danny gave me that day has went a long way, to be honest.
Can you go into like specifics there? So if our listeners just now maybe they're building a Twitter following, or they're really starting to use Snapchat or Instagram. I know Instagram is really big in the fitness side of things as well. But what specific advice you mentioned there about getting your brand into the messaging as well? How does that, what does that mean?
With me, it was like, because I had this umbrella of a brand I was building, what was MusclePharma at the time, and I was essentially the face of it because we really didn't have any athletes at that time besides some of the UFC fighters, but we hadn't really activated them to that level. And I really became the voice for the brand. And I would argue with anybody that when there is a strategic, real voice for the brand, that somebody can have a personal relationship or an affection towards a person, and they can like a brand the same way too, but it's they can buy into the story, you can interact with them, it changes the way they feel about the brand. And that's what I believe that I did in a proper fashion in all the social media, and that's from free content, that's from making myself available, that's from question and answer, and that's just from being me, man, to be honest. And so I don't know that it was extremely well thought out all the time. It obviously morphed over time, but in the early days, it was about, if I got a customer and they need help, I'm going to help them. And even if they're not asking for help, I'm going to help them anyway, because I'm going to put out the content that's going to make them get better results.
So how did that feel when you put yourself into that brand so much, and you kind of became the voice of that brand as well? When the company then went on to go, the IPOs and it kind of goes into a different place, and it's not quite your baby anymore. How did you start to kind of think about that and the relationship between your brand, your personal brand, and then the brand of the business?
Yeah, that's where the struggle started a little bit. But honestly, I left, 8 or 9 months ago. I really didn't have any problems with that till the last couple months, and that's when I took off. So, I mean, it really is this simple. I woke up one day and said, you know what, this ain't my jam anymore. Things are different. Time for me to do something else. I would say a week later, I was talking to John and said, you know what, we can do the exact same thing for brands anywhere in the world, and we can build brands ourselves. We both have the chops. We both, are kind of getting out of our respective businesses at the same time. Let's connect and let's go have some fun. And neither of us are rushed, which is nice because we already, like John alluded to, we already made some cash, so we didn't need to rush any part of the business. So I really think that I'm not one of those guys that I just, when I make a decision, I try to make a really definite decision. Like I woke up and just knew it was time for something else.
And with these fighters you're talking about on the UFC side, these athletes, not knowing anything about this world, how does it relate to when you're building athletes as global brands? So my understanding is things like UFC, there's a competitor to it in Asia now as well that's kind of being built up. When you're trying to work with your athletes and think about their social media and their marketing strategy and everything, how do you kind of speak to them about the global side outside of just their home country that they're working in?
Well, it's simple. So the UFC, I don't know if you're aware, they just got purchased by WME IMG. Are you familiar with WME IMG, James?
I'm not, no.
Okay. William Morris Endeavor.
Okay, I know William Morris.
Okay. They just bought the UFC for $4.2 billion. It's the largest sale for a sports franchise ever. And the reason they did is because obviously they're partnered with IMG. IMG pioneered selling sports advertising assets, and they bought the UFC because it is poised to be the second most popular sport in every country for one simple reason, right? You can take a fight in any corner of the globe, and it doesn't matter what language you speak, where you're from, man or woman, you understand it. Man, when soccer made its big push over here, like when I was a kid, a lot of people didn't understand soccer. NFL in Europe.
I still don't understand soccer. I'm from the UK.
Yeah, and fighting, the bottom line is if it's packaged correctly, which it is with the UFC, if it's marketed appropriately with millions of dollars behind it, which it is with the UFC, it will resonate with the 18 to 34-year-old demo everywhere in the world. And it has proven that. It's in Europe, it's in the UK, it's in Australia, it's in Macau, China, and it's on its way to being global. As it relates to the athletes, James, it's very simple. You are a global brand. you are a global brand. But the difference is the UFC has 600 fighters on their roster. So what are you going to do to differentiate yourself? And for young fighters, it's very simple. Just win. Just win and worry about marketability later, because nobody wants to market with a loser. Once you're on top of the game, then you have to understand that fighting is entertainment, right? That's why people watch boxing, because it's entertainment. And that's when you got to have, I don't want to say a shtick, but you have to highlight part of your personality. So at the end of the day, the UFC is simply a global brand. And if an athlete is at the top of it, they have the ability to communicate with the world. How they choose to do that, yes, we advise them specifically. But the one thing you don't want to do, James, is you don't want to make someone put on a persona that's not authentic. Authenticity is everything. And
is that, you find that especially because this is what we hear with, I speak to big beverage companies that are making vodkas or beers or something, and he said for the millennials, authenticity is the thing. You know, they're going for more, rather than going for big brands, they're going for more like, you know, craft ales and all that side of things. So are you seeing that because you're marketing to millennials, you know, the majority of the time as well? So that authenticity thing, that's really kind of coming through for you.
So yeah, exactly. So if you were marketing to older people with athletes, you would take the athlete, you'd put them on social media, and you'd say, today for my sponsor, we're running a 20% sale on this website. Here's the code. That's how you market to the older demo. The younger people, all you do is you throw on that sponsor's hat backwards, and you have the guy walking down a beach, and you don't say anything because they don't want to be told what to buy. They want to be like, oh man, that dude looks dope in that hat. What kind of hat is that? That's how millennials respond.
So, and Cory, for yourself, did you get a sense that when you were starting to do all this stuff, you were really almost becoming a media company as much as you were selling a physical product?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm about as authentic as it gets too, from a training standpoint. I own a gym that's looks like it's stuck in 1970s. I'm act like a wild man when I train. I really don't necessarily like change anything from that, from my standpoint, like for anybody really. That's just kind of how I am. And so like when I started capturing that and giving people real answers, when they would hit me like with some soft ass bullshit, and I'd be like, no, quit front and do it this way. Like, you just, you know, it's hard. If you want a body, like you gotta put the time in. Like, I think when I just took the same approach that I would if somebody walked in old school gym and asked me the same question, the authenticity kind of carried through at a high level. And that's definitely one of my assets, man, is that that's just me. And people grabbed that pretty early for me. And I think it's been big for sure. And the millennials are the ones that follow me mostly. That's my demo is mostly high school and college.
And let's talk about in terms of apps and tools and things. For our listeners, do you have any kind of online resources or tools or apps like Evernote or that you absolutely love?
I'm sorry, James, say that one more time.
Do you have any online resources or apps or tools that you use a lot, you just don't think you could live without? Mobile, you know, apps on your phone that you just couldn't live without, and you suggest our listeners check out?
Well, yeah, CoryGFitness.com. John knew that one was coming. Honestly, you know what's so funny? I was just talking to John before the podcast. I downloaded a comic book one, and I just made us a comic book for our Business and Biceps episode 6. I don't really have anything crazy that I use on a regular basis other than my social media apps. I love Snapchat. It's really intimate to be able to go back and forth and send direct videos to people. I think it's kind of the same concept I had with Twitter, but just even better. And in reality, yeah, Cory G Fitness is a great app just because I've got all my training stuff right on there that I'm following along with the customers, and I can answer questions and whatnot. But I don't have anything that I super lean on. To be quite honest, man, I still write a lot of stuff in a notebook.
So your workout routines and things like that, you're kind of writing down what you've managed to do that day.
It's all in my head, man.
It's on your head.
Yeah. It's all in my head or on my blog for my members. I'm literally like pretty throwback in all aspects of that type of stuff. So John, you got any apps you can't live without? Or what?
I was just gonna say, James, man, we're as old school as it gets, because about 5 months ago when we came together, man, I wasn't using Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. And Cory said on our first podcast, you could check it, he's like, all right, we're going to get John to start using some social media. So I'm like, I got like no apps on my phone outside of the ones Cory said, hey, download Snapchat, dude. Download Instagram. And what's really cool that Cory educated me on is he told me that he read, I don't know whether it was an article or what, that said, if you have 1,000 loyal, like really loyal people on social media that give a shit about what you're saying, you can build quality businesses off their loyalty. And what I've learned from Cory, because I study what he does, because he does a phenomenal job on social, is that I don't want a big number. And I made a post on Instagram. I said, all you entrepreneurs that show our youth yachts and women and mansions, get off my shit, man. I don't want you following me, because that's not what it takes to be an entrepreneur. You know, you want to show someone what it takes to be an entrepreneur? I want to show them video of guys getting hit in the nose in a boxing ring. That's more like an entrepreneur, not sitting on the back of a yacht. Stop showing them the end and show them how you get there. So Cory's taught me a lot. And listen, business is business, man. If we rely too much on technology, I believe we lose some of the real creativity, right? The real creativity that makes entrepreneurs entrepreneurs.
And it's funny, whenever I always think about this, whenever they have films of successful people, they make a document or movie of their life, that bit, or the hard work bit that you were just talking about there, John, that's the bit they do like the quickly fast going through. I mean, even like you think about Rocky, movies like that. The bit was that you're doing all the training. That's the bit they speed through really, really quickly because they want to get rid of that. And entrepreneurs is the same thing. Whenever they tell the life story of these people that built great businesses, they kind of speed through that little bit. They don't show that bit.
Well, when I tell my story, it's a lot. Go ahead, John.
No. All I was going to say is think about it. People like to fantasize about the life, quote unquote, but you know, it's not realistic, man, unless you're willing to get in there with Mike Tyson metaphorically and throw down on a business level daily. You ain't never going to have that mansion. Forget about the yacht, bro. You got to put them up daily.
Yeah. And I would say, like, when I tell my story and people always like, well, MusclePharma blew up, this, I'm like, but I was grinding a personal training business from 19 to 29. Like I was in the game a decade and no one had a clue who I was outside of my little city. And half the time in the city, they didn't even know who I was, just to get the opportunity to even bark at trying to do supplements. Like a decade. And like when you tell, and then before that, the labor jobs I had for 6 and 8 months as a coal miner, as a lumber stacker at the sawmill, like to even save the money to grind for the 10 years to get the opportunities. Now we're talking 12 years, and it's like people are like, whoa, like they just want to hear about, well, you hung out with Arnold. Well, dude, that was 16 years later.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or 14 years later.
And Cory, I mean, you John, you mentioned about Cory saying having those 1,000 really dedicated people, and it actually it's based totally on research that, and it absolutely works. It's called the 1,000 True Fans concept by a guy called Kevin Kelly was the guy that wrote it. I think he was one of the editors of Wired magazine, and I've seen it in it doesn't matter what industry it is. I've seen it time and time again. People that activate those really 1,000 true fans, those core fans, they can build businesses from it. So just as we start to finish up here as well, recommend for our listeners one record, one album, and one book that you think they should check out.
Nice. You start first, Johnny.
Well, okay. My secondary Bible, James, is obviously, you've heard of it, The Art of War by Sun Tzu. I have the original. It's over 1,100 pages. It's basically for those of you who've never heard of The Art of War, it is written by a general in over 1,000 years ago in China, and it's simply about strategy in war, but the parallels to business are uncanny. And I have learned so many lessons from that book. And if we're going to talk about, did you say a favorite album?
Yeah.
Or an album to check out?
Just it could be a favorite album or an album you think maybe doesn't get enough listens and people should check it out.
Yeah, okay. So an album that does not get enough listens that you guys should definitely check out. Real artist, real musician, Nathaniel Rateliff, Rateliff, and the Night Sweats. This guy will take you back. It'll feel like you're jamming in the 50s with a little bit of hard rock in there. There's a little bit of Jack White in there. Nathaniel Rateliff and the Night Sweats.
Nice. Cory, and what about you?
So one of my favorite books of all time is The Wisdom of Andrew Carnegie, told by Napoleon Hill. It has some great success principles. I would say it's, I guess my secondary Bible, essentially too, that I've studied and read probably 25 times over the past years. I'm a huge Carnegie fan. A lot of things that he had donated money to. Close to where I grew up, I saw his name everywhere, libraries and schools and buildings. And I'm from Ohio, but close to Pittsburgh, where kind of he had resided or he had grown up at some point. And so, when he moved over, I think he immigrated from Scotland, but when he came over, he spent some time in that area with the steel. And so that by far, Carnegie's been a huge inspiration for me. And John will laugh. I have a pretty select group of music I listen to, but I think I'm really going to surprise John, especially with this pick.
You're not going to say John Mayer or something, are you?
I'm not going to say John Mayer. So I would say the album I listen to the most is actually All Eyes on Me, Tupac, which John I'm sure will laugh. But I would say the album I wish I listened to more would be the Led Zeppelin album that has I forget what it's called, but it's the one that has Dire Maker on it and Stairway to Heaven, I believe. So John, you might know what it's called.
I believe that's Led Zeppelin 4.
Zeppelin 4. So that's actually my favorite rock album from being a kid. And I no lie, it's not something I go to often, but one of those songs from that LP come up. It's the only time you ever hear me turn up rock music in my car. So I would say that the Tupac and Biggie is my mainstays, kind of, because that's when I grew up in that time frame, and I could just identify with the essential kind of come up as a poor kid. Didn't matter what race you are, it really kind of spoke to me. And then, but from a rock standpoint, I wish I listened to Zeppelin 4 more. John.
Well, I got to close with James. With my brain I call it 33%. Rage Against the Machine, so yes. I cannot forget to mention them.
I'm a big Rage Against the Machine fan myself as well. Funny enough, where I'm speaking to you from today, Cory, is about 40 miles from where Andrew Carnegie was born and brought up as well. I'm actually in Scotland. I'm speaking to you from Scotland today, so when you guys come over, we're going to have to we'll go to his house and we'll go and do the whole thing and even do some whiskey tasting or something like that as well. So, guys, let's imagine if you woke up tomorrow morning and had to start from scratch. So you have the tools of your trade and the knowledge, the skills that you've acquired over these years, but no one knows you. You've got to restart. How would you each restart?
That's a great question.
Yeah, without a doubt, I would immediately, as an entrepreneur, I would go into a service business. The service business sector is a sector that any entrepreneur can start up with way less capital and connections than other types of businesses. Okay, I would probably use my knowledge in certain areas to reach out cold to people, to cultivate a base of at least potential leads. Or you could do something very simply. Me and Cory both come from the gym business. It's very easy to start your own personal training business. What does it cost? It costs knocking on some doors, calling some people, talking to some people. So I would go into the service business, probably something like that immediately, save up some money, and then start swinging for the fences after.
Yeah, actually, I'd be very similar. Service business, whether it's, obviously I'm a fitness guy, so I would go to the local gym, show up, hopefully get a gig there or one of the places close by. I would immediately sign up for social media because we're assuming that I didn't have it because I'm starting over. I would shoot multiple things of content daily. While I'm building a gym business, I would start to create an online personality and then evolve from the gym business to an online personal trainer, which, I enjoy. So,
well, guys, some great recommendations there. Thank you so much for coming on the show. What's the best way that listeners can connect with you, find out more about what you're working on, your different projects?
I think you come to the podcast, John, first. What do you think? That's where they need to start. Come right to Business and Biceps and listen to our craziness on a regular basis. And then our website's activatemedia.com. And you better follow John Fosco on Instagram.
No, I'm too crazy. I swear too much, James. No one should follow.
Well, we're definitely going to put your link down. If people go to jamestaylor.me, we're definitely going to put your Twitter links, all your social media stuff, so people can follow you, so they can be your 1,001th follower as well. Guys, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure speaking to you today. I wish you all the best with the new businesses and the new projects you've got happening.
Thanks, you, James.
Hey, James Taylor here again. And if you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.